All right, we're gonna get going. Welcome to the January meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Brian, would you like to read the first application that we have before us tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first application up is a continuance of a request of Sylvain Dumet of 55 Greenfield Lane, Scituate. They were requesting a special permit / finding to allow them to raise and reconstruct a pre-existing non-conforming garage or structure at 55 Greenfield Lane in Scituate. This hearing was continued from December 20th, and since the last hearing, the applicant has requested that they be permitted to withdraw their application for relief without prejudice.
So moved.
Second.
Seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The second application is Amy Lago Marcino, trustee of the Amy L. Lago Marcino Trust of 272 North Montclair Ave, Glen Ellen, Illinois. Ms. Lago Marcino is requesting a variance pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 10, to allow the building of a garage / shed that encroaches on the sideline setback in the rear yard setback on their pre-existing non-conforming lot located at 15A Collier Ave in Scituate. Representing the trustee, Ms. Lago Marcino, is
Anthony Pombianco?
And can you spell your last name, Anthony?
P-A-N-E-B-I-A-N-C-O.
Thank you.
And just for clarification, it is for a shed, it's not a garage, but shed, it's just a shed.
I saw
Fantastic.
it. I saw it. It's a garage.
We'll just, all right, why don't you go ahead with your presentation?
Certainly, thank you, board. I think our letter that we addressed on December 20th discusses all the points that we would make relative to the request for the variance for the 12 by 16 shed on the property within the R3 setback. And the three factors under the 40A, the shape of the land, the hardship, and the lack of detriment to the public, I think we meet all of those criteria to be granted the variance that we're seeking here. I can go point by point if that's helpful, or if we have particular questions relative to each point, we can address those as well.
Why don't we go point by point?
Sure. Relative to the shape of the land, 15A is a very unique property. It is the L-shaped property on that land. So the front-facing property is a minimal positioning there. So the structure to be able to place, because of the way of the shape of the lot lines and the lot in and of itself, with the pre-existing structure on it, would make it virtually impossible to have a shed of any nature or any existing detached accessory structure without being in violation of the setbacks. Therefore, the violation would be necessary to place a shed anywhere, essentially, on in the property relative to the structure of the lot in and of itself. Secondly,
Wait, can we stop there?
sure.
Does anyone else have any questions about meeting the first prong of the test here?
I'm curious as to when the lot was actually created. It may pre-exist zoning, but under what circumstances was it created? Was it?
The house is built in 1910.
I believe, I did a little bit of research, and I believe the lot is at least that old.
But again, under what circumstance was it created? Was it a subordinate structure to the property in
At
front?
13?
And then was later subdivided out?
No, I think that lot, that individual lot predates zoning.
It looks like that lot was created
Well,
sometime
it definitely
Well,
predates,
I
it
don't
definitely
disagree that
predates
it
zoning.
zoning, but
Was it,
I'm
is it
the
one of these,
interest under which it was created,
is it a Minot deal where it was a carriage house that
Right.
then became a
that's where I'm coming from.
separate dwelling?
Didn't check the
That,
title
that
to
would
the
be, that would be
exterior
my
lot.
guess, and it's academic.
It's
Right,
academic,
'cause I-
but it is a function of the kind of things that we do face here in our town.
Absolutely,
Particularly in
especially in
Minot
Minot.
And I'll forecast my concern of the slippery slope. We do have other small lots like this in Minot that were created because the carriage house behind was separated out so that it could be held under a separate ownership at some point in time for whatever reason prior to zoning, and that becomes an issue when we're trying to apply zoning to lots that were much more conforming to what the intent of the bylaws were,
And
even though they pre-exist.
And I just want to take that a step further. Traditionally, a unique nature of a lot qualifying a situation for a variance involves a unique shape of a lot. I think what's unique about this lot is it's small. And traditionally, that doesn't check the box for me. Right? It's a small lot, which makes it a non-conforming lot. That, just being small, or being small with a big house on it, I'm not sure that the case law supports that qualifying you for a variance under this prong of the test.
It does not, and I would go a step further, Anthony. I don't think they come anywhere near meeting any prong of the 40A Section 10 test.
I was hoping we could take them one step at a time
Yeah,
and
I
let
mean,
them
but
make their
not
presentation.
even, I mean,
So,
But from an advice to or information for the public, a variance is different from where this board often finds special permits under the bylaw. We create 50-foot frontage lots under the bylaw. A variance is something that is a higher level to attain.
the highest level, the courts say, the SJC says that they should be granted sparingly.
So we're
and
cautious.
the thought process behind that is a nonconformity is being created where one didn't exist before. And that's a big part of the differentiation. But why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, we would respectfully disagree. Well, we can go point by point, because I think that's helpful for the board to discuss that. But the case that we cited particularly relative to the oddly shaped lot, that does grant relative to an oddly shaped lot, which this is in the zoning district, and it makes it unique relative to the R3 district. It's not unique in and of itself, but it is unique as to the R3 lot. The R3 zoning district, there are not a tremendous amount of lots, and a variance can be granted for an oddly shaped lot under that basis of the Cressy case that we cited. And we believe that the oddly shaped nature of this lot makes it relative to where any shed would be placed, it would require a variance because of the nature of the lot. If it took up both 13 and 15A, like traditionally the other neighboring parcels do, you could have space to have a shed, but because of the oddly shaped nature, where you have the long line, that it is very narrow, based in part because of the way that it's shaped, it makes a variance necessary in this particular instance. So I think I respectfully disagree that Cressy case does provide that an oddly shaped lot, which this is, sufficient grounds to grant the first prong of the three-part test.
Okay. What about prong two?
Prong two relative to hardship, as we again cite in one of our cases, even a relatively minor hardship can justify a variance. And in this particular instance, the hardship that we discussed and we talked about is relative to the other properties and where it is located. It is ideal and meant for much like the rest of the homes there, to have utilization and access as a summer family home and to use the beach that is close there. So it is necessary and appropriate to have a shed to store minor amounts of kayaks or summer utilization items, whether it's paddleboard or something of that nature, and a lawnmower that they're perhaps seeking in that regards. And the hardship would be the inability to be able to fully functionally utilize the home as it's intended to be in that particular zoning district, in that particular area where it is, to be able to use the home. The capacity to add the storage would give the house the fully functioning utilization that it's intended for, and that would be necessary there. The request that we're making of a 200, under a 200 square foot size shed, it's not inappropriate in the neighborhood or in the area. Most of the other homes within that zoning district have a similarly sized shed, similarly sized on their property, so that they can utilize their home in the fullest capacity, which we're asking and seeking to do. It's an efficient use of the space, and I think it goes to the hardship of being able to utilize the home in its full capacity, which is they intend to do and hope to do here. Any questions as to the second prong?
Tom, Ed?
I mean, for me, it just pops out, it's not something necessity, it's more like a convenience, you know? I don't see it's gone how long without a shed
It
on the
had-
property?
I'm
Yeah.
taxed on a shed
It's,
or a garage.
Yeah, there was a prior accessory dwelling on that property prior to, yes, she's been taxed.
Accessory dwelling?
Accessory structure. Accessory structure on that property, which we cite in ours. We went and tried to find the records here in both the building department and zoning department to see when that accessory structure was created and destroyed, but they don't have the records of that. The only one that we could find was an old card that acknowledges it, but we have in our attachment showing the old plot plan that shows the existence of that accessory structure. So it existed prior. Whether or not it's in the identical footprint, it's hard to tell because we don't have information that doesn't exist. But there was an accessory structure on that particular lot. So it is trying to utilize what the function of the original plan was, the plan of the property was. Utilize it to the best of its ability and what was previously provided and granted by the town, whether as a right or otherwise, because we can't find the record for it.
And so, say for a minute we agreed that the shed was a necessity, and I'm not sure we do. Why can't a shed go anywhere else within the envelope on the property? I see that nowhere else within the envelope on the property would be as nice as this one, but I see space to put a shed on the property.
That would abide by the setbacks?
Well, we got 8 feet on the north and 8 feet to the west, and it would have to overlap the bluestone patio, but I see room for a shed there. Now, it's not where I'd like to put a shed if I didn't have to comply with setbacks, but I see space for storage on this lot. So to the extent storage is a necessity, I'm not sure storage in this location is a necessity.
Well, I think there's two functions to it. One, I think because of the fencing that would surround two of the sides of it, it will make a de minimis viewpoint from the abutters to be able to have it there. Instead of having it open, it would be easier to see if it's in the middle. But also, where there's already the home structure and the patio structure, if you were to have a shed there, the entrance would have to be necessarily from the other side where the shed currently exists. So it wouldn't make sense structurally or logically to move it onto where the patio is, where you're suggesting. And I think as a cost-effective measure to be able to dig all of that patio up to be able to place the shed, I think that in and of itself would create an unnecessary hardship where the location is prime and ready for this shed to be located.
So you're talking about turning it? So,
I think so.
I'm talking about a different structure within the setbacks
Okay.
that could be used for this necessary storage.
A different structure, a different location of structure.
A different location of the structure.
Yeah, and well, there is no other available space on the land unless you move it all the way forward, essentially, in that left-hand area, which would
Right.
still be, would still require a variance of that necessary setback.
Well, okay. A smaller shed fits on this lot in between the house and the exterior of the envelope, right? It might not be
Right.
convenient, It might not be the most economical, and it certainly might not be what you
Right,
want,
it's
but
not
a
gonna
smaller
fit
shed fits on this lot
bikes
within
and
the envelope.
trash and kayaks, right?
If you were to go 100% by the setbacks, in this-
Which we tend to do.
in this,
Why they're there.
That's,
without
Okay.
seeking a, without seeking a variance. I'm
Yeah.
saying the shed would be essentially less than 4 by 8, which wouldn't fit anything there.
So
I respectfully disagree.
I see a bigger shed than that fitting.
I do too.
I see a cobblestone apron on the other side of the house.
Yeah, I see space for an 8x10 shed, maybe I'm off by half a
It
foot.
looks like this,
Not, again, not in the best spot, I fully recognize that. But I see space for a pretty decent-sized shed within the envelope. Not where you might want to put it, but to the extent storage is necessary, I see space for storage on this lot.
I think the space for storage where it's presently located is the best utilization of the,
Totally different statement. I don't,
Look, in a
I
perfect
don't think I
world-
disagree with that
In a
one.
perfect world, it could go there, and that would be conforming. However, you have to conform with the Scituate zoning bylaw. So I understand.
Unless you get a
If you-
variance.
If you,
But
if you
just
look
us,
at,
it's-
if you look
everyone
at,
has
if you
to.
look at what you, the
we'll get
space
to
you
that
have
point.
to utilize, I understand from a design standpoint, it makes perfect sense. Let's put it as close to the corner as we can. I absolutely understand from a design standpoint, from an aesthetic standpoint, why that makes perfect sense. However, you're in violation of 2 of the setbacks. So you need either a variance or you need to move it, and I think shrink it.
and I would think moving it is a impossibility
Of that size, I would agree with you.
on the space. You would still be, if you're trying to move that anywhere, you'd still be back here asking for a hardship, asking for a variance.
I don't think a shed that size fits
But you can.
on the
move it.
lot now.
if we're looking to store kayaks and stuff, I mean,
Kayaks
I
and
think the
lawnmowers.
shed would have to be smaller to,
you could store every kayak in mine
Yeah.
in that thing.
what's that?
That,
Oh, yeah.
Put a
No,
garage on the apron.
well, right.
yeah, well, that's the other thing I was looking at. This is, it looks like this is already on cobblestones, right? So this, we'll call it a pre-existing garage that existed as of 2018, is on cobbles. And there's a cobble apron over here.
That's just a design. It's
But I'm-
too,
But what I'm saying is, I
There
think
is
that
no
this
existing
area
garage.
over
so you're saying
there.
putting it in front of, right in front of the house?
Yeah, that's not a pre-existing garage.
No,
That's
that's
a
a
pre-existing
structure that,
as
there's
of
a structure that exists
2018.
there right now.
This.
That's what's
That's the
there.
shed we're talking about.
Right, that was put up in 2018.
Right.
Yeah.
We recognize that.
That's the one that they're here for the variance for.
Did you get a
Yeah.
permit
I'm
for
not
this, or
saying
did you just?
Did
pre-existing
it's under
non-conforming.
200 square feet,
It's
so
under
it
200
didn't
square
require a
feet.
building permit? It is in violation of the setbacks, obviously, that's why we're here.
200 square feet?
Yes.
All right,
I thought it was
so
120.
maybe just to keep things moving, I think you had another prompt.
Yes, the lack of detriment and deviation from the intent of the bylaw. In that regard, it goes what she was saying just a moment ago as to the nature of the neighborhood. The nature of the neighborhood is that there is a tremendous amount, most of the abutting properties and neighborhood have sheds of a similar size, of a similar stature, near or onto within this setback, just as the one that we're requesting is to be. So there's no detriment to the aesthetics or conditions of the town that have a very or that residential zoning district that have a very similar nature to most of the homes there. We do have 3 abutting property owners that have submitted letters of support that have said that they appreciate and do not have any arguments against the shed being there, and that is, I think, should be considered in the nature of this. And the aesthetics that are intended for the outside of the shed, the way that it is to look, is going to look in the same aesthetics of the neighborhood. I think it's going to be architecturally pleasing and within the same Cape Cod style shingle houses that we see there. So it's architecturally appropriate. But the detriment, substantial detriment to the public good, I don't think exists, and you meet that 3rd prong in that regard as well.
So you've got a much better point on this prong, I think. We should note, Sue, can you correct me? I think we got 4 or 5 letters submitted from neighbors, 3, maybe 4, one at the last minute? Or is it 3 total?
3 yes and 3 no.
Oh, 3 no's, okay. It seems like the folks across the street generally are against, and the folks on your side tend to be for. Did anyone speak to the Leets? The next door, yeah, the Leets are here, so we're gonna hear from them in a minute. You know, you're correct. We've all done some research. Quite a bit of the neighborhood has sheds or better than sheds, which appear to violate one or more setbacks. Obviously, to the extent those sheds are pre-existing non-conforming, there's a little bit of apples and oranges there. My guess is 1 or 2, or maybe more of them in the neighborhood aren't pre-existing non-conforming. Maybe some of those weren't quite so substantial of a shed, and my guess is maybe if this one wasn't quite so substantial, there would have been a little bit less of an outcry. But does anyone have anything to add about prong number 3?
No.
Prong number 3, I don't have a huge argument with.
Yeah,
I do.
No,
and we promise we're gonna get to
Prong number
you.
3, number 3 is talking about properties and sheds and structures that pre-exist zoning. They, presumably, because I don't know that if they came before us, or before this board, they would have been approved. I'd like to go back to that.
I think it
Number
does,
2.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I believe that if we were to grant it, it would derogate from the intent of the bylaw. Personally, that's my personal.
I would agree with that. Yep. That, yeah, pretty
Not
pretty
to say-
clearly, I think.
And
Yeah.
it's not to say that their situation in Minot is unique, because it's clearly not.
Right.
But Minot's not in front of us. This is what's in front of us. We have to rule on what's in front of us.
I would agree there.
See if there's more evidence we have.
Would you have anything else to add before we hear from some of your neighbors?
Just the opportunity to respond to anything that the neighbors like bring up that we have the opportunity.
Yeah, we're gonna give you that.
Thank you.
All right. So folks, if you could just, your name and your address for the record when you speak, and why don't we start with you guys?
Okay, I'm Jonathan Lee, it's my wife Tracy. We live at 14 Ocean Ave, and our property abuts the aircraft hangar behind us. We've been friends with Amy since she bought the house. Since before she bought the house, we've been friends with the Belties forever, friends with Brian, the builder. We all want to get along, but this structure is a real imposition on our property. It's significantly, it towers over the fence, towers over our backyard. I did speak with Jeremy when we first went up, and made it very clear to Jeremy at the time that we were not in support of it, and that we would not support a variance.
Mr. Leet, who is Jeremy?
Yeah.
My husband.
Thank you.
Amy wrote me a letter and tried to explain her position, but I thought it was very clear when I talked to Jeremy, but it's literally inches from our property line. I mean, it's not even close to conforming, and it's quite a bit more than a shed, as you recognize from.
And I have one, you know what, no, I don't. Why don't you go ahead?
I appreciate the concerns of the neighbors. I think it's hard probably to understand until the structure is seen, how it will blend in with the surrounding neighborhood, and trying to get the entire scope of what the building is, because it's in a rough shape right now, is probably hard to understand. I think that once it's finalized with the aesthetics that we talked about and the photos that we provided of the intended aesthetics of it, I think it'll blend in a little bit more than it currently is. I also know that there is concern in the neighborhood and because of all the tremendous amount of construction that's going on directly in front, not related on this particular lot. But there is a lot of construction going on, and whether or not that has an impact on the overall desire to try to limit the construction here is, I can understand, but it's not appropriate relative to whether or not this variance should be granted and whether or not they meet the factors. And for the third comment, I know you said that you think it's outside of the intent of the bylaw. I believe that the intent of the bylaw is to have, partly is to have uniform and consistent zoning for the properties. And the structure that they're seeking, an accessory, a detached accessory structure, is within the intention and within the R3 zoning district, what is permitted there and has been permitted there, and the consideration and the aesthetics of that particular zoning district. So I don't think it's so far outside the zoning district that it would be, that it would deviate from the intention of the bylaws.
Anyone else?
Yeah,
Yes.
Tom Higgins, 12 Collier Ave. I think it just sets a bad precedence to allow someone to build so close to an abutter's backyard, house, property line, when they can easily put it within the bylaws, within, 8 feet around on the property. 'Cause I certainly don't want someone to do that to us, to our property.
Okay,
Easily.
thank you. So, we have anything else?
I'd just like to observe clarify if I'm incorrect. The structure that you're currently building is in more or less the state as indicated by the photographs?
Yes.
It's on a cobble or paving stone pad.
Yes.
It's not on a poured foundation. It's not on my experience in construction is probably greater than the other gentleman on the board, but
Well, that's not saying much.
but I've moved something of that nature after it's completed relatively easily. This could be partially disassembled, relocated with minimal equipment. I see other spots on the lot that it could locate. I think that the choice of this location was unwise in that it is so close. As the pictures that you've shown, there are other structures very close to it on the back side, the side opposite what appears to be a garage doorway. There is a structure, a roof line, which is lower than the roof line that you're building. I'm guessing that's maybe the Leeds property, those
Behind.
roof structures directly behind. They are also very close to the lot line, presumably pre-existing.
Been there for a long time, yeah.
Good answer.
But I guess I wonder why it couldn't have been put in the area in the northerly rear of the lot, the northeasterly corner at the end of the driveway.
There's a
Septic,
yeah.
the septic,
You could put this structure on top of the septic and still be able to access it.
Yeah.
It's a
Like on a
not-
floating, you mean like a floating floor or something?
It's what it's on now. You're on
It's a good point.
But if you have to access that,
the tank,
Then
they just dig it up,
Pull the car out and you
they put a pipe in.
pull whatever's out and open the
Kayaks
tank and
out.
pull the kayaks out. The type of storage that is presumed for this, the need of the type of storage that's presumed here could easily be accommodated in a structure that would access the septic. That's not allowed.
Well, no, just a comment. Typically, the back lot line and therefore the back setback,
is 50.
in this case, which is 20 feet, is determined to be parallel to any street frontage. So as I look at the lot, that's, there's a rear setback along that property line.
I agree with you, but again, if we were looking for some way to create relief and accommodate an unusual lot, I would be more willing to view the rear line setback as a side yard setback in that case, where, and granting 8 foot from that rear line would be significant relief from the bylaw.
Okay, well, that's a different argument.
But the relief that would be more consistent with.
And that nonconformity along that lot line exists already.
Yes, there's a nonconformity right now. It's already 7.8. The house is 7.8 on that lot line.
Yeah.
So it's an extension of a pre-existing nonconformity as opposed to or an intensification of a pre-existing nonconformity as opposed to creating a new
Well,
non-conformity.
that's a good point.
And it would be relief, not a variance. I understand every time the V word comes up, the hair on the back of my neck goes up, I cringe, we don't grant variances, not that it hasn't happened, but it's so rare that I think once in my career on the board, which is multiple years,
So we absolutely do grant variances. I don't mean to so directly disagree. We absolutely do grant
within our power
variances
to do it. It's very, very
when we feel that the prongs are met. And we do certainly very seriously review and scrutinize a new modification or change or, divergence from the code, and especially from setbacks, especially in very dense neighborhoods. So we absolutely do grant them, but the factors need to be met, and we take that review very seriously, is more the position that I would like put out there.
much more articulate than I myself.
Well, yeah, also, yeah, so.
What's the difference between a special permit and
A special permit generally, and I'm being overly broad, but I think what Ed was referring to is a special permit in the sense he was referring to would be involved in a modification or potentially an intensification of a building regarding a nonconformity that already existed.
okay, so not a new thing?
Well, I was thinking that would be more of a finding, but in our special permits, there are special permits within our bylaws which are allowed. We are allowed to do certain
Is
things.
something
that
like
are out-
this?
And the standard of review is similar, but the threshold is not as high.
Would this be, is that something that we could try for, or is that?
It's certainly,
Not in this location, I wouldn't think, because these are nonconformities that don't exist previously. But along the rear lot line, that's certainly a much better chance for a finding.
yeah,
or a special
what you'd have to do is you'd have to go back to and you'd have to decide what you want.
Right.
Go back to your engineer and your lawyer and decide what relief you're seeking, and then come in with a different application for a special permit under 40A Section 6 versus 40A Section 10. The standard for the granting of a variance, again, the level of scrutiny, the level
Higher,
is
yeah.
much higher.
So so the structure that was previously back there, if we could find out exactly what it was, and it's
gone.
So once it's gone, so.
Not once it's gone, but what, is it 2 years? How many?
Well,
think
I've
it's
owned the house for,
It's 2 years.
it's been gone.
If you found that there was a structure in this footprint and it existed
footprint.
20 months ago,
There was a foot,
That's
there's
a-
this weird
Right.
outline of railroad ties that I think may have been. the
if you
footprint
found
of
it existed less than 2 years ago, this would be a very different conversation, in my opinion.
Just the footprint or actually the
structure.
building?
The
structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
You bought it from Megan
Stoltz.
Stoltz. I don't know if you have any way to get in touch with that person and see
No,
if
it was
she's,
a flip. Someone in Scituate bought the house, flipped it, she bought it, owned it for 2 years.
okay.
I think, looking back, 2 years is come and gone, right? Yeah.
And again, I'm sympathetic to your desire to use your property as you would like to see. But I'm very concerned that we have to be, as much as we can, consistent with what the bylaws are. We're the appeals board, and get relief where it's necessary and reasonable. But I don't see this as a reasonable request. I would argue that there's other places to put a shed like this on the lot. This was a ill-conceived location.
From a zoning standpoint, from an aesthetic standpoint, it was the
It's
best
exactly
location.
where you want it. Looks great.
Yeah,
It's very frustrating that we have two outbuildings, one is a guest house and one is a garage, right up against our property line on
Totally understand, more likely than not, those buildings in some shape or form were pre-existing non-conforming and therefore allowed under the
and we
code.
had one, but someone tore it down, so.
If you look at the.
and that's, and again, is we have seen over the years, that is the case with Minot. Minot is I think the area of Scituate that has the greatest number of these former garages that became carriage houses, that became second, two lots
It used to
on,
be a carriage house. It's, it was of almost equal size to the house in front. I believe it was a family thing. The O'Briens lived there, and their daughter, but it was a separate
Yeah.
lot. But it was not, it wasn't a carriage house, I don't believe.
But nothing wrong with a carriage house. That was the style at the time. You could have carriage houses that were quite large. And the curly house we dealt with 15 years ago,
yeah.
in Minot, the carriage house was very large. And it was looking for relief, and it was clearly existed, and there's lots of, it's not that weird, but it is, the relief you're looking for is unusual, and in my mind creates too much of a slippery slope for me to be able to support it.
What if it was, so even if it was smaller or less high in that spot, it's just no good for you guys?
For a variance?
For a variance.
No, probably not. It's a new building in a setback where a violation of that setback didn't exist before. Now, in practice, if this was a lot more sheddy, my guess is it never would have got to this point, and so we wouldn't have to make the call as to whether or not a variance was necessary.
If it was one of
You
those
wanna let
lawnmower
them
sheds
withdraw?
that's sitting in the front of,
Yeah.
or something of that dimension, 12 by 10 or 10 by 10.
Well, lawnmower, bikes, trash, outside
no, but it-
furniture, I mean,
Something that's delivered by one of the big box stores, something that size.
Yeah.
It might not be as aesthetically pleasing, but, 16 by, no one would have even seen it. It would have just been there.
Yeah.
And not on a foundation.
well, it was different. I mean, there was a huge canopy of trees there before, and then my neighbors in front of us put a big addition on and cut the trees down. So, I mean, it did look different. It didn't,
Yep.
I certainly did not intend to put an eyesore and,
What's,
bump
Totally
somebody
understand.
out.
the drawings that you submitted, it was, after construction, it'll be a beautiful looking shed if it were just in another location. But aesthetically, it's gorgeous.
We've sort of made our position relatively clear.
so.
I think your counsel, as well or better than us, is aware of some of the difficulties that arise if we vote on this variance and go maybe the way it seems like we might go. With that in mind, do you have anything you want to propose? You maybe,
Yeah, we'd like to propose,
you, take a second, by all means, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
no, it's okay.
Invite the people out in the hall to come on in. My son's out there.
Oh, really? Fantastic.
As the board knows, relative to the variance request, we're here because of the building commissioner had requested and said we should seek the approval. We're likely, as the chairman has indicated, to ask for a continuance or to withdraw, but we don't want to be in violation of the building commission. I don't know, the building, to be able to approve.
There's no particular violation, I think, that you're speaking about. We got a complaint to the office, followed it up, noticed the situation, and it was my suggestion that the zoning board should be allowed to view the conditions and make their judgment. So here we are, but there's no particular, beyond that, from my point of view, there's no particular
I was wondering if we
conditions or
would-
connection.
If we withdraw it, does that put us back in violation and you have so many days and then it starts accruing? Or if we go for the vote and then say we want to appeal it, or, I
We don't
want to
wanna go-
confer with my husband.
We're just talking now, nobody's gonna hold you to anything,
Okay.
absolutely. If you go for the vote, and if we denied the variance, you would certainly have the right to appeal.
Mhm.
If you didn't appeal, or if you lost that appeal, you'd be barred, in a certain sense, from coming back on this issue for a period of time.
Oh, okay.
Right.
in the same issue as a variance or as a special permit as well?
And we're getting a little more technical, and that's for him to answer.
It's just the variance, it's not,
Yeah.
it's not for the special permit, you can still seek the special permit. But if, I think that's more what we're trying to feel out from the board, if coming back again before the board to seek the special permit, if it would be better to, for your sake, if you would approve to withdraw it without violation of any building code and having fines accruing then, or if you would prefer that we amend to request special relief in that way. I think we gotta go withdraw and special, submit under a special permit for the new location.
Yeah, I think you heard from the building commissioner, there's no pending violation, so if you
Right,
were to
at one
withdraw,
point-
you'd have a clean slate.
To clarify, at one point, we were talking about a potential situation where fines could be levied if this hadn't been corrected within a certain amount of time.
But there's a dialogue now, so I
Right,
assume that's no
right.
longer the
Ab-
case.
Absolutely.
That's what my question was.
Well, when
Well-
does it start to become unreasonable that the existing construction there isn't taken down?
I think it's unreasonable in the sense that if you're pursuing an alternative solution during the time you're pursuing it, that totals the situation.
Absolutely.
Right.
If, for instance,
It's on pursuing.
right, I mean, if, for instance, these people went away and nothing happened
Right.
within the next 6 months, I would not be a happy person.
Or if construction continued.
Or if construction
No,
continues.
they're here, they're not,
No, I understand,
Right.
I'm just being clear, trying to be clear.
Yeah, no,
If
that's,
think they wanna-
construction doesn't continue, we're
Good
going
faith
into the
effort,
winter.
you know?
Yeah.
Let's face it, it's a difficult time right now, but if in a reasonable period of time, and what is that? But if 6 months from now, it's still sitting there in the current state, and no effort has been made to move it forward, and then there may be concerns by the building inspector.
Okay.
yeah, my guess is they'll be back next month, because they want to get this done so they can put their kayaks in it this summer.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
That would be our intention, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so withdrawing it?
Yeah, with that, we
Well,
request it.
just, if they're coming back that quickly, can't they just request a continuance
No,
and modify
because
their
it's, no,
application?
no, it's a
Different
it's
thing.
a
I think
different,
if we're
We're
going
going
different
from
relief.
variance to
Permit.
special permit.
Yeah,
All right.
we have to,
How-
we have to.
It's
Good
good.
one,
New
quick
notice.
question, yes.
I mean, seriously.
Just your name again, sorry?
Jonathan Lee,
Thank
I
you.
mean, how long should we have to expect to look at this thing?
I think we just threw out a time where we would start to go from reasonable to unreasonable.
I mean, 6 months sounds like a long time to me.
I don't think it's going to be that
It was
long.
built without a permit, it's within inches of my property
No,
line.
it
The
was
town
built,
is
it was
over
built
my house.
conform, it was built, the structure does not require a permit, so it was built in a legal way, just not in the right location, so, but at the same time, it would be to the applicant's best interest to perhaps reach out to the abutters who have expressed a concern,
Okay.
and, I understand, and, try to find a location on the lot which will meet her needs and, be more satisfying to the neighbors. But again, at the point that we're looking for a finding that it's not significantly detrimental, and we have a situation where pre-existing nonconformity on the rear line setback already exists, and other aspects that are unique to this lot, it doesn't necessarily have to be the neighbors weighing in positively all around. Sometimes it's their property and they have a right to do with it what they would like to do with it.
You
Just
love
like-
it, love to take a look at it
just like you
anytime. It's-
Yeah, I think some of us did. All right, so with that, you seek to withdraw.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion.
Move to allow the withdrawal of the application for variance without prejudice.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for your consideration.
Absolutely.
Are you Mr. Vogel?
Hi, yes.
Hi, Amy, we spoke on the phone.
Yes,
Nice to
Amy.
meet you,
It's
nice to put a
meet you,
face
too.
with a name. Thank
Yes,
you for your,
and the same.
didn't really know this, but
Well-
you actually warned me, you said, don't go for the variance. I should-
The next application
Yeah, it's a
up
tough
is of Darren Campbell of 57 Acorn Street in Scituate. Mr. Campbell is requesting a special permit/finding under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 48, Section 6, to allow the construction of an addition to his pre-existing non-conforming dwelling at 57 Acorn Street in Scituate. increasing the gross floor area by more than 20%. I would say that the structure is not pre-existing non-conforming.
Let's just read and then let them make their presentation.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Representing the applicant tonight is,
Brendan Sullivan with Cabanero Consulting. I'm here with the applicant and owner, Darren Campbell, 78 Fourth Street. So the lot was created through a subdivision that was from the subdivision in 1958. The structure was built approximately 1962. It has a required area of 20,000 square feet in the residential R2 district. Has almost 2,300 square feet area. The area of the dimension is lacking is the frontage. The frontage is 52.36 feet, where on a cul-de-sac you're allowed 60 feet, so we're just shy on the 60-foot requirement for a frontage in a cul-de-sac. They're proposing a two-story garage. I'm sorry, first floor garage and a great room. I think master suite. Master suite. So we're under we're increasing the area by approximately 64% of the gross floor area. So that's what triggers we're over the 20% for the gross floor area increase.
All right.
Thank
Thank you. You guys have anything? Any questions?
So the master suite above and two-car garage underneath?
Yeah.
Is it septic over there, or is it town sewer?
This septic in the rear. We're proposing a porch in the front also is in the front of the house.
Uncovered?
A porch is covered.
Oh, it's covered. Excuse me, yes.
Porch is uncovered.
Yeah. Thank you.
Porch is a roof.
Yeah, but there's no relief needed for that portion of the
no,
property.
because the structure was put up pursuant to a variance, the variance makes it conforming. So it's not a pre-existing non-conforming structure. The lot is non-conforming.
Yes.
So they can get the special permit and they can extend, they can do what they want, but it's with a special permit relative to the lack of frontage.
I would agree.
Okay. But this essentially makes that structure conforming because it's constructed pursuant to the variance.
Meaning that you feel that the only nonconformity at issue here is frontage.
Is the frontage.
I would agree.
I agree as well.
And it's a completely benign relief that they're seeking. To me.
So you're against it?
I couldn't be more in favor of it.
All right, here we go.
I'd order the lumber tonight.
Ryan is the first to show his cards, and he's leaning for. So am I. The lot seems a little more complicated than what we often see, where we have a frontage or a front setback nonconformity, but I'm not even sure.
Lot width.
What happened was, you've got to have so many feet through the dwelling.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, when they poured the foundation, it was 2 feet forward of where it should have been.
Gotcha.
And nobody noticed until somebody went to a bank, and the bank went out and ran some tape, and they're like, yeah, you
Violate lot width.
yeah, you can't, that's uninhabitable, because it's in violation of zoning, so, so
They
Jack,
got a variance. We grant variances.
because of substantial hardship,
Hear that, appeals court? We grant variances.
No, this was a substantial hardship. The current owners couldn't sell it.
Right.
The people that wanted to buy it were living in the house, they weren't paying rent, and it would have rendered the lot useless, virtually useless, would have rendered the house uninhabitable had the relief not been granted. It's not like they couldn't store their kayaks.
Right.
They couldn't transfer the house.
And it's 1964, it's before they had GPS and they actually had to go out there and peg it on the land and.
So there's a nonconformity. There's probably an argument that this doesn't even intensify that nonconformity But I think even to the extent it does, I think with the Gale review in mind, this looks pretty good to me.
I would agree with you, Mr. Chairman.
We have anything from the audience, any abutters?
When could we start putting the foundation?
Tonight.
Oh, no, well,
20 days.
there's a decision needs to be issued, which is allowed to take up to 90 days. It goes a little faster than that typically. And then there's a 20-day appeal period from when it's filed. You build during the appeal period in your own risk. Some people do that, so, yeah. In the absence of any other comments from the audience, do we have a motion?
I'd make a motion on the application of Darren P. Campbell, 57 Acorn Street, Scituate, Mass. His request for a special permit pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 6, to allow the construction of addition to a conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot, as depicted on the plan prepared by Cavagnaro Consultant dating 12/12/2018, that this board grant the special permit.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Do you want to take a crack at doing the
That sounds like a fantastic idea. Thank you very much. All right.
Next up, we have our old friends from Dakota Partners. If it's the zoning board, the Dakota Partners are here. 3 times in a row. This is their request for a modification of a comprehensive permit issued on February 10th, 2003, most recently modified on September 1st of 2017, and more recently modified, I think, in December of 2018. The property at 90 Stockbridge Road, and representing Dakota Partners, we have attorney
Why don't you guys just state your names for the record? That'd be good.
O'Shaughnessy.
Michael O'Shaughnessy, for the record, Mr. Chairman, other members of the Scituate Zoning Board of Appeals. We're here tonight on our request to make some changes to the comprehensive permit. To my left is Dick Benedictus. He was the engineer. He can give you guys some technical information. And to Dick's left, Mark Palat, Mark's from Dakota Partners. As you recall, we were here about a month ago. We asked for you folks to determine whether there are changes, which was to reduce the number of units from 74 to 68, and to do some additional grading changes, was substantial or insubstantial. You had said to us it was your opinion that it was substantial, and this hearing was scheduled. Over the last month, we have provided you with updated site plans, some architectural renderings, a landscaping plans, as well as a stormwater report that's probably an inch or 2 thick. So what I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is just kind of get into the changes with the project with Dick, and start rolling from there, and we can answer your questions as they come up.
Sure. Very quickly before we do that, I just want to raise a couple of questions that'll be very broad, if you guys could try to hit on them in your presentation. One of the things I definitely think you're going to hit on is impervious area. How much more, how much less, where was it moved from to? Another thing is, and this is certainly more broad, the subject of additional or new peer review has been brought up. And it's been brought up from several sources. We'd like to hear your thoughts on that, hear whether you think it's necessary. If you don't think it's necessary, why?
Well, we can address that right now if you like, Mr. Chairman, or we can go through the process.
I leave that to you. There was one more thing, and then you can have the floor, was coordination with the fire department. I think some of your coordination with the fire department has begun or has occurred. I'd like to understand whether or not you think that's complete, what else is in the works, what else will be done, and whatnot. But sorry to throw that all at you. I didn't want you to get going and not cover those.
Fair enough. To address the public safety components, when we were here last, the members had raised, go do your due diligence and speak to the fire chief and the police chief and the DPW. Mr. Plott did that. And I think most of the departments were okay, except the fire chief had wanted a hydrant added or a couple hydrants added.
That is correct. We made changes to the hydrant location based upon their recommendation, and as we mentioned to them, that once we get the plans done, the architecturals, we'll come back and sit down and go through that as well.
Okay. With respect to the peer review, again, I think we can get into that with you folks as we go along. From my perspective, the changes aren't that significant. We're talking about some grading changes and some stormwater changes. The stormwater changes are reviewed by the DEP. And the reason DEP is reviewing it is because they issued a final order of conditions, which effectively, and I wasn't involved with it. This project was before the Conservation Commission. We appealed to DEP. Superseding was ordered, then it went to adjudicatory status, and DEP stepped in and issued a final order of conditions. If you folks approve the changes tonight, we still have to go back to DEP, and during that process, they will look at our stormwater management and design, and they'll vet it for themselves to make sure it satisfies the Massachusetts stormwater standards. So they're the authority on that. So with respect to the stormwater component, I don't think any peer review is necessary. I think DEP is going to do that. And as far as the grading changes, we can go over that tonight. I don't think there's anything that significant, but Dick can certainly point that out as we go forward. Sure.
I'm just going to, I brought an easel, but I think I'll do what the previous gentleman did and just hold up the plan, because I'm just going to show you on this plan the before and after.
And if I could just ask you to speak up so that the folks in the audience can hear.
We have an easel if that's easier. You think,
Oh, I have an easel too. Oh, okay, yeah, I like it, actually. Mine is one of those collapsible ones that sometimes
Collapses when you don't want it to.
Now, this first drawing here, and I'm not sure how much I can get focused, but first drawing is what was previously. This is the old scenario with the multiplexes. Multiplexes consist of everything from a duplex up to an eightplex, okay? And they're all townhouses. This was prepared for a developer who was interested around 2007, 2008, just before the collapse of the economy, and that's why they didn't go forward. But this was the scene before, and while we were doing this, we went through the scrutiny with the Conservation Commission, and that had primarily to do with the stormwater and the basins, and we had to basically prove that the design that we already had was sufficient, and we went through a long process for that, got peer reviewed from the town, and it wound up going through DEP. And the DEP wound up doing the settlement with the town, between the town and the developer, or the owner actually, which basically said, you will do it this way to us, and we have authority. Conservation Commission is no longer the regulatory authority. They are part of the process. They can contribute comments, they can do that, but there was a settlement between the town and the owner that basically said the DEP will take the total authority and final images, you can review that and it's very tight scrutiny on it. And to follow up on that, when we designed this redesign for the four apartments, we wanted to do something different because the market had changed. Again, I'm not sure if you can see, but the market had changed so that the multiplexes weren't bankable, basically, because the interior units just weren't, the way the banks looked at it financially. So Dakota came up with the idea of duplexes. Excuse me, it was cold, I've had it for like 2 weeks and can't get rid of it. But, so we looked at this, started several months ago, to redesign the site to fit the duplexes. We didn't change the roads stayed the same. We didn't change the stormwater as far as the basins themselves, except for this exterior area back here, which is a subsurface system. All the others are open pond types. There's a long pond, so to speak, basin on the entrance road, which didn't get touched at all. We did nothing on the entrance roads. So what the effort that we made was primarily, okay, how do we put the architect's duplexes on the site in its best form? When you're dealing with these large buildings, and as I said, up to 8 plexes, it's difficult to do grading that's really creative. I mean, you just gotta make the building fit there. With the duplexes, you're grading around every site, so that's where the grading came in. So we graded around to make the duplex units fit right. Because you're dealing with duplexes, so you have a smaller total building versus the multiplex. But you still have all the other attributes to it. You still have roof drainage, you still have site drainage. So some of the things we did, you can see these harsher lines back here and over here. These are actually subsurface drains, primarily for roofs, but they also take into some of the grading around the building. So we took some of the flow away from the existing basins. So and you can see that if you have your summary sheet for the hydrological calculations, you'll see that.
Dick, on this, we've got 20 sheets. Do you know which one it is out of 20?
To do which one? What do you want?
You just mentioned that if we looked at a specific sheet.
Oh, no, I mentioned
The summary.
the summary sheet
Stormwater drainage
for
summary?
the computer program for the stormwater. The actual stormwater design is in a computer program called HydroCAD. And as part of it, now, much of it is like 100 sheets of graphs. You don't need to look at that.
Yeah,
What
no.
you need to look at is the summaries that show what each pond does. Now, the ponds themselves were originally designed so you had a basin, and then you had what we call a water quality wetlands. So the basin didn't just top over and go wherever. The basins actually went to this wetland. And effectively, we're able to contain the 100-year storm in every one of these basins. Okay, it doesn't overtop. And that's not something you design for. I mean, no board has ever asked for that. You usually design for 25-year storm. You maybe get 50, but we actually have it. And one of the reasons we were able to do that, this site has exceptional percolation. Because when I just worked that out, it was less than 1 minute for all the interior. You have to get towards the wetlands to get the solar rates. So we have very high percolation rates. The basins work fine. They worked fine for the 74 units that we had before, 2-bedroom units. Now we have 68 2-bedroom units because the duplexes actually take up more space from the point of view of laying it out on the land. So we had to, so that's where the redesign was. Basically, the redesign was basically between us and the architects. Stormwater wasn't really affected, as you can see if you read the summaries. We actually met with the DEP about a month ago, Mark and I, Mark's from Dakota. And we said, okay, this is what we want to do. We're going to go from this plan that I showed you originally to this plan. What do we have to do to get your approval? Because you're the jurisdiction for us. And it's not the Conservation Commission based on the final order conditions. And they told us, file an amended, basically an amended application just to amend it to the duplexes. And they'll look and with very high scrutiny through all the basins, make sure that what we did didn't disturb anything. The only change was up here. We made this is a subsurface system, as I said. We call it Pond 5, but it's actually under the ground. And that's what we call a recharge area. They're all recharge areas because they all percolate. But we took some of the flow away from this by putting these infiltrators in the back here. So about half of this hill here, which is called Sandy Hill Circle, about half of it would drain that way. Now we've intercepted some of the flow, so we've reduced it. And part of it was so that we don't have to get too close with the subsurface system. I mean, you won't see the system, it's for the grass and all that, but we still wanted to keep the buildings away from it. So the other basins, which were number 1, which is on the entrance road, which isn't changed at all. Number 2, which is already built and certified by the DEP, because it was built a number of years ago, when it looked like that developer was going to go forward. Number 3 is over here, and it basically, it's shown in your full set of plans. So this is, I just did this because it's simpler. If I show all the contours and everything, it would be very confusing, but you have the plans there. But number 3, changed just a little bit, really minor change, and we talk about that, and we'll present that to you. The last one, number 4, some change, and number 5 is, as I told you, it's a subsurface system. So the drainage didn't change. One thing we had, at one time we had a retaining wall back here, which was really a negative to the site, but the original developer wanted a retaining wall because he's doing multiplexes and he wanted the grading to be a certain way. Dakota came on and said, geez, we don't see any reason for the retaining wall. So we brought that up to the DEP. That was one of the main reasons to go to the DEP, and they agreed with us. If you want to remove the retaining wall, fine. They just wanted us to put like a stone berm down here, but we did more than that. We actually put the stormwater interceptors behind the building. Now this is going to be where the retaining wall crosses the back of the building behind. Now we're going to do a gentle slope down to these areas here. So these infiltrators, just like those, take not only the roof, but they also take the grading around the buildings. So they reduce some of the flow going here, even though we have sufficient basic capacity there, it still reduced some of it. So basically, nothing's changed from the point of view of technical issues. We've got the same roads, pretty much the same basins, 99% the same basins. All we did was put duplexes where there were multiplexes, and we did regrade because the old grading wouldn't fit well with the duplexes. So that's kind of the main point. And you brought up the point that you asked.
The impervious.
The impervious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's kind of outlined as well in
yeah,
the
it's
summary.
outlined in the letter. There was, even though these smaller overall buildings in the buildings, they're a little bigger units, so there is a little more, and there's 6 less of them. And
Just 6 less of them, and what's the change in bed count?
68 versus 74. It was 74.
Those are
That's
units,
units.
right?
And there's 2
Oh,
bedrooms
bed
in
count,
each.
2 bedrooms. I'm
2
sorry.
bedrooms in each.
130,
12.
136 is it? Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, 136 for.
2 bedrooms in the units that went away and 2 bedrooms in all the 68.
Right. Yeah, they're all 2 bedrooms.
Yeah. So when I looked at the impervious, as Dick was pointing out on this, we have a greater impervious because of the buildings.
How much greater?
Yeah, it's actually in this letter.
It's in the letter.
Sure, I mean, it's just for everyone here hasn't read the,
Yeah, in one second.
It's approximately 20,000 square feet of more building area. However, we've reduced the amount of impervious area by reducing some asphalt. The asphalt the paved surface area was reduced by about 20,000. So at the end of the day, there's probably about 8,000 square foot net of additional impervious area, sorry. But that's accounted for in this new design.
Right, and in that old design, we had some extra parking, just because of the way that, you have multiplexes, you have to have for guests and all that stuff. But now we have garages, we have driveways, so that's all taken care of. So the difference that was added in impervious was taken up by these infiltrators. And that's with the design. Basically, the design for this is overall better for the site. Not that the other design was bad, it was just, that was what the other developer wanted. When we came to this, as I said, we worked very closely with the architects to make sure everything fit properly. and we didn't make any major changes. As I said, the roads are the same, the basins are the same, the stormwater, in the summary sheets, you'll see just about exactly the same. And in many cases, an individual pond has actually got a reduced flow where it had more, and that was, again, because of these infiltrators. So that's pretty much, but if you have any other questions.
So, just for the applicant and for our fellow board members, on the aspect of peer review, I had 2 conversations this week. The first was with the town's council, asking about the subject of peer review, in which her opinion was it is not an automatic that a peer review would be required upon an amendment like this. At the same time, if the board saw a reason why new peer review would be required, that's a different story. But her point was, it's not, okay, you have a substantial change, you need to redo peer review. I also spoke with Brad Washburn on that point. He initially agreed with town council, and then it seemed like he spoke with some of his staff, and my guess is that includes some of the other boards of town, and then his recommendation, I believe it was just yesterday, was that peer review should occur again. That happened recently enough that we weren't able to discuss specifics.
John Chesia was the engineer that's been shepherding this project on behalf of the board, as the board's consultant from its inception. And he knows, I think he knows this backwards and forwards. I don't think it would be too much to ask. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that the applicant come up with a retainer for John Chesia to review the proposed amendments. And if everything is, as they say, straightforward and really not that big of a deal, it shouldn't take John long to go through it. And I have a comfort level with John and his representations to the board based on his 20-year history with this project. And I think it would be foolish of the board to not take advantage of his services, given his history with the project. And this is, dealing with these issues is something typically that's done by the planning board and the Conservation Commission. This is not work that we typically are dealing with on a monthly basis. And that's why I'm comfortable deferring to an expert on that. And Dick, I mean, no disrespect to you and your representations, and if everything is as you say, I'm sure that you and John Chesia will be able to have a meeting of the minds in short order.
Well, let me just, can I add to that?
Absolutely.
We had a meeting of the minds that took us a year and a half and delayed the project previously. That's why it wound up at DEP. And DEP found in our favor. The final decision was in our favor. And when I talked to DEP last week and today, they said they are the peer review. They are the authority. Even, no matter what John Chesia says, he's already cut out of it because of the fine water conditions stipulates in the fine water conditions that there is no additional effort. But the Conservation Commission can comment and all that, but that whole authority has been taken over by DEP. Okay, and this was as of today, talking to the person who's going to review it. Now, they are the experts. John's a nice guy. Took us a year and a half to go through. I mean, basically, you had a hostile situation.
Yes.
We're not going to go through that again. That was
Yep.
not an objective review.
I didn't mean to smile, but I feel like some people think I'm a nice guy like you think John's a nice guy.
Well, I know John as a social.
Right.
Social.
Yeah.
From a point of view of review here, no. And that's, I'm not going to put down John. The fact is, a year and a half review, and we had at least a dozen partial reviews during that period of time. That never ended. That's why it ended at DEP. You can go to DEP and ask them, but that's the reason.
So to that point, it sounds like you've gone to DEP and asked
And
them.
it's only, the project's been like 12 years. And I haven't involved with it.
Sure.
Well,
Is
no,
there
it's-
anything that you have from DEP for us based on your recent
No,
conversations?
DEP will look at what you guys say is okay, subject to their review of stormwater and wetlands. And
Right.
also, a separate agency within it, a separate group within the wastewater treatment plant, which we already have.
So you're saying it is not possible for you to get any confirmation of your conversations with DEP regarding the change for us?
Well, there wasn't really that kind of situation. What I asked them is, okay, I brought up the peer review situation. I said, what do you think about this? Are you the peer review? They're the experts. It's their regulations, okay? He said, we are the peer review.
Well, with all due respect, they're the regulatory authority. They can't do peer review.
They're gonna review this to make sure it
Ultimately,
meets
absolutely.
all the regulations.
Absolutely.
What's John gonna do
That's
different?
their
What's John
job.
gonna
They're the state agency. But you present something to them, they're the state agency that oversees the work that you do. But they're not doing peer review.
Yeah, because they.
All right,
they're-
I think everybody understands both of your positions on that particular item right there. You guys have anything else?
I think I echo what Brian says. I think we have a duty to have, I mean, I understand, we've already voted that it was a substantial change. Obviously, the change has affected drainage, right? It was addressed
Just
in
a
the
minute,
application.
sorry.
We were given a new storm drainage calculations. It was addressed in the application. I think it would behoove us not to have.
Okay, this,
Okay, sorry, I'll come back to you, I promise. Ed?
I'm of the opinion that the state agency, DEP, is going to, I agree from the Conservation Commission standpoint, and that they've already weighed in, they can have input, but that a peer review is simply for our board, which is not professional in this area, to hear that what's being presented is consistent. I don't think it has to take forever. I don't think it's an area of, I understand that in the past, but you were dealing with another board too. You were dealing with Concom on that review.
there they go. Stormwater is Concom.
Right.
Now it's DEP.
I understand, but when you are discussing the fact that it was a tedious process in the past, I don't think this has to be as tedious. I don't think that some of those issues are still open. They're closed. This is a case of peer review. What's the change in circumstances as a result of the redesign? I don't see it as being that big a challenge, and I don't see that either in time or in expense. And I think it's wiser to do it so that down the road we don't have, if there is a water issue in a neighboring property or the railroad bed washes out. I just don't see the argument about not doing it.
Go ahead,
Mr.
please.
Chairman, are you asking, is this something that the board would entertain doing in conjunction with the submission to DEP? The town's not left out in the cold during this. We have to notice you and notice the Conservation Commission. At that time, it would probably be more appropriate for him to weigh in and give his opinions to DEP at that time, and they would consider it.
I think to answer that question, I think what my fellow board members are proposing is before we find that this substantial change is not substantially more detrimental, we want to see that peer review to confirm some of the conclusions that were presented to us tonight. That's what we are saying. It seems like you guys feel that that might not be necessary. Be happy to hear why. Sure.
Do I have the budget? It took a year and a half to kill the first project, okay? That basically took us into the economic disaster. We went for a year and a half with peer review. That's absurd. I've never done that. I've only been in business for 25 years.
So just
okay?
to stop you for 1 second, you're talking about what sounds like a very lengthy process that occurred in the review of the initial project. I think everyone here is very clear on the fact that a project with 74 units was approved. We are interested in a peer review of the changes the increase in impervious area, the drainage, and the like. So it would be a peer review of that, so I don't think we're dealing with quite the
Yeah,
same
we're not,
process.
we don't have to reinvent the wheel with this.
Yeah.
Well, I
So-
agree with the review is a one-day work. I mean, if you really had to spend a lot of time, you could do it in a couple hours, but a one-day
Sure.
review. If you put a limit on it, so we're not going to partial review, partial.
That
this is
sounds like a very
actually-
productive
this is what I was
suggestion.
going to look at, along with this. This shows you exactly there's no changes. That because you have 20 more, you know, more impervious area, and you take care of it with these calculations, that's not even a day review, okay? And we want to, and that's something the DEP would look at.
For,
What
for
we
me,
don't wanna
putting
do
a
is
cap on the amount of
say-
time that a peer review
say-
would take sounds very reasonable.
Well, the other thing is, can we have a mutual consideration on who does the peer review?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we
I
need
think-
that, because we already went through a bad time with this.
I
So
think the
you
board-
are, well,
And I'm representing the owner.
I,
So more-
I
you know,
fully understand that, yeah.
Yeah, I just, 2 meetings ago, I was here, Brian made it very clear to me that his son graduated college when this thing started.
No, he was not yet born.
Not yet.
He's
That
now,
was it.
he's now
That
a
was it.
sophomore in college
Thank you.
and
Thank
in
you.
attendance.
And I told you, I'm here to get this thing done,
Sure.
bottom line. And I held up my word since I come here. I told you, when I came here, we'll get it done. That will kill it. A peer review guy, I don't, no offense, but I've seen the documents on this, and it's just, and I've been to enough hearings, and I've been to enough peer reviews of projects throughout the state and other states, and this street doesn't warrant it. We could not have produced a construction set of documents in a month if it was a major change. It was such a minor change. We were able to get the guys to produce these plans in that fashion and that speed that you have today, so that we could get shovel in the ground this coming spring. And that's the whole intent, as I told you I was going to do.
Yes.
And to say that as a peer review, I have no faith in that individual to stay focused and on track, because to get.
Is there another individual that you have faith in?
Mr. Chairman, what other firms does the town deal with? I know Amory is a local firm, they're in Duxbury, have you dealt with them?
I can give you the list. I have a list of who.
I think that'd be helpful. I mean, I don't think well, obviously you know our concerns, but, well,
To say the least, but.
but if, I guess the board's inclination is they want something, and if we can agree on a scope and have some input as to who's selected, I mean, if that's what it takes to get this thing through.
Brian, what would your thoughts be as to the scope of the peer review, and who else, other than the prior peer review, might be able to complete it?
Who was used on, Herringbrook Towers there?
I couldn't tell you, but it sounds like then that you're open to another peer review. of
Yeah, I mean,
completing
my preference
Gentlemen?
is to dance with the girl that we brung, but.
Yeah, but my understanding is the end of that night didn't go so well. And,
That's right. I didn't get a kiss goodnight.
So I could understand that, especially where that peer review process went. That sounds like a pretty reasonable request to me.
As long as it's somebody that's.
That's
the town.
qualified, obviously.
Yeah.
That the town has on a list that
It has
is,
to be on the town.
yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm certainly comfortable with that.
There's a former member of the Conservation
So
Commission,
what- wait.
Mr. Clark.
let's,
I'd just be curious to get his opinion if he knows. of
we're
something.
gonna go to the audience. Okay, so it sounds like we're open to proposing peer review from someone on the town's list, which there is more than the peer reviewer that you guys don't want to use. What about scope of the peer review? It sounds like impervious area and stormwater drainage
Yeah,
should be
I-
reviewed as to the change, obviously not starting again from scratch. What else do we think should be reviewed? Or is there anything
Yeah,
else?
Anthony, my whole point with using John is that John is familiar with the project, so
I
the scope of
understand
his
that.
review would be limited because he doesn't really have to, do a lot to get up to speed. Now, notwithstanding the objections of
Yeah.
the applicant. Now, can Mary Smith professional engineer get up to speed just as quickly? I don't know. I would guess, but I don't know.
In principle, I agree with you, Brian, but where the applicant is so strongly concerned about the past experience.
I think that's putting it mildly.
Sometimes teams don't necessarily work well together, and you need to make a change. And that's not to cast any doubt upon John's ability or performance. He's worked with the board before. But if it's an uncomfortable situation, we do want to move this forward. I perceive this the changes of this plan as being generally positive. I like the way it's moved. I like the fact that we've got one level living in some of the properties. All sorts of good things here. So I wouldn't like to see it delayed unnecessarily. I do think a quick review, as quick as that can be, and thorough, should be done. Changing peer review, does that make it a longer process? Does that increase the scope? I don't know that it has to. You're reviewing the data, but
It shouldn't. It shouldn't.
Right.
I have all the confidence in my design, and the limits that we've made changes are very minimal. I'm not worried about it personally. I'm just worried about the individual that's doing that review and making an unlengthy delay in the process, which Brian's made clear to me.
You guys good if we hear from some of the audience that we're ready for that?
Just a couple
Yes.
more highlights, Mr. Chairman. Again, the original buildings that were last permitted, they were a mix of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units. They were about 36 feet in height. These new buildings aren't 36 feet in height. They're 26, 27 feet. I think you have some of the architectural renderings. I think that's a positive.
Yeah.
We've got a pretty robust landscaping plan. If you've looked at it,
Thank you, and thank you for everything that you submitted. I haven't had the chance to go through it thoroughly, but thank you for getting that to us. And if anybody from the public has any questions about what it is that they're proposing, all of this is available. These are public documents. You're welcome to come and take a look at them.
Just let you finish. Did you have a little more for us? Sorry.
And also, I want to point out as well, the issue about the grading, you talked about that. With these smaller buildings, we can work with the land better, which helped us because we were exporting over 10,000 cubic yards of material off the site in the original design. So now, we're not exporting. We're using the land as it is there. So
Right.
it makes it much easier.
Sure.
and then the other thing is the traffic should be reduced. Less units should be reduced trip count.
Less
So
beds, less units, garages.
everyone, yes.
Are they 2-car garages, 1-car garages?
One car garage.
One-car garages.
With the presumed parking spot out front?
Correct.
Yeah, unfortunately, I tried to get two.
All right.
Those are effectively the highlights of what we're looking to change, Mr. Chairman. So,
Okay.
Public comment?
We're gonna give, Sue just stepped out, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna give her like 30 seconds to come back, just because she's doing the minutes. And then we'll take some public comment.
I would do name and address. So
Yes, and then once we do start, just name and address, please.
it's difficult for Sue sometimes to know who's speaking, especially if you're speaking a second time. If you can just, seems
Thank you.
tedious, but
Thank you.
reintroduce yourself and let them know, let her know.
Actually, if you could leave one for Sue, or if you're running out, you can give her mine, but just so she has it, that's useful. Thank you.
I think she may be trying to seek that list.
See the engineer list.
She might be getting a list.
I think she
Good stuff. We'll give her one more minute.
She's one step ahead of
Do you guys remember, should we use John on Walden Woods? Whitcomb Pines, did we use John? Remember we used Pannoni, they were a huge national company. We used Pannoni for Oceanside Village.
I'm using them in Virginia now.
Yeah, they're a big
They
outfit.
have big, they have big.
But we had a 250 unit 40B in front of us, so we needed somebody with everybody. They had traffic, they had LSPs, they had everybody.
Yeah.
So Sue's gonna come back in a second. We already mentioned name and address. Also, if you could please direct your questions to the board. We just try to avoid it getting into too much of a back and forth. It's hard for Sue, and it can just get out of hand. And then we will go from there. What do you think? Give her another minute?
How about those Patriots?
Let's hope. It's a bit scary.
It's gonna be cold.
It's nice having playoff games on Sundays rather than the rest of the sports where sometimes we have zoning meetings. You know, public comments are shorter when there's playoff games going on.
Shame more than once a minute.
Yeah.
It's not at 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, yeah. We had a very quick meeting during a Red Sox playoff game.
Yep.
By the way, this is the title on the HydroCAD thing?
Yes.
You're only gonna look at, I mean, you can look at the graphs, but I mean, you're only gonna look at this section, the write-up. And that's really all the review would be, there's nothing more, you know, you really, there's nothing more to look at.
Yep. I understand. Perfect. So we provided the list of town engineers. Oh, I'm aware. Yeah. Yes.
Just let me.
So we provided the list to the applicant,
Yeah,
and it has
very good.
caused the applicant to leave the room. What's that? Yeah, please. What? We'll let them come on back to the table, and we'll take some public comments.
Was CEI, was that, CEI, that rings a bell, was that, Herringbrook Meadow?
I think it might have been.
Stockbridge is down here, the road itself, so it comes around.
So where's he at?
This is the
All right, if we could try to do it through the public comment, no, it's no problem, it's not a big deal, it's just,
Just a board.
yeah, all good.
Go ahead.
All right, if the engineers come back, all right, why don't we start with you again, just name and address, please, thank you.
No problem. My name is Michael Clark. I live at 103 Stockbridge Road. Just for the record, I have a little history on this. When it was first submitted, I was the chairman of the Conservation Commission. I was not involved in the litigation, okay? So a few things. First of all, I want to commend the board for the language in the recent extension, including the May review of the project. I can only speak for myself. I'm just a little concerned about how this project has progressed. The clearing was done. I know the economy went bad, but there's been a couple changes to the project since it was initially approved. So again, on that matter, I appreciate that you took some steps to ensure the financial viability of this development. So in regards to the peer review, I highly recommend a peer review. That area is in our surface water, edge of our surface water supply. There's additional impervious area. Mr. Benedictus has indicated that all the peer review he needs to do is look at the tables. That's not true. That's not accurate. The peer review should look at the proposed design, how the water is collected and treated. You should look at the data and also what the input is into HydroCAD, because I'm familiar with the program. Depending on the input and how it's inputted, you can get different changes to the design. So I would recommend to the board that they do a peer review. Also, with this project being really smack dab in the middle of a residential period, I would recommend to the board that during construction, that the board retain someone to review construction. Stockbridge Road is a highly traveled road. There's going to be a fair amount of construction traffic there. And also to make sure to provide assurance to the community that the project is built in accordance with the plans. The third thing is that during when they did the previous clearing, if you looked at the site plans on Google Earth, There appears to have been some cut-through to the neighboring properties that wasn't really talked about during during the public hearing process. So that, I want to make sure that how that interaction happens gets included into this discussion. I am not against this project. It's been there, it's been approved for a significant period of time. I understand that there's, that this is likely to go forward. It's also been a fairly long time since traffic has been reviewed in this location. So now we have a major driveway with, was it 60-some units, I heard?
68.
I would recommend that, as part of the peer review, there'd be a cursory review of traffic. And so those are, and just one thing, and I think the board has said that the wetlands protection regulations and the filing of the notice of intent is separate from the board's review under the comprehensive permit, okay? So those two things are, while they're in parallel, they're separate. So I encourage the board, again, to do the peer review, basically to make sure that our water supply is protected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone, did you want to respond quickly, or that was quite a bit, or?
Yeah,
And-
really quick, Mr. Chairman. Again, the elements that are at play here are changes. Traffic's already been reviewed under the other permit, so that's not on the table. And again, part of the analysis that the board has to do is the cost of permitting. That's a consideration. And that's kind of part of our concern. It's tied together. We don't want our costs to continue to escalate here. So, but I understand the gentleman's concern.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Jennifer, 88 Stockbridge. So we just moved in about a year and a half ago, so we're basically right next to you. So we're a little bit concerned about this drainage of how this might affect our property, especially since we are in marshlands already. We have two sewage pumps. So we're just wondering, one, I would like the peer review because I'm concerned about the drainage issue and the change. I also, separately, being new here, is who do we speak to understand how this impacts us while this construction is going on and the new traffic of 60 cars? Is there going to be a traffic light, a stop sign? We're literally next door to them, so I'm just, who would we speak to?
There is, my understanding is there is not a traffic light or a stop sign planned, and is not part of the plan, and as the gentleman said, the project is approved. In terms of traffic, this is a reduction in the project that was approved, maybe not a big reduction, but it's certainly not an increase. So I would tend to agree with him that traffic really isn't on the table here, and that is approved.
I'm saying, who do I talk to understand how this impacts our life?
So there's gonna be 68 units worth of additional cars. I'm not sure that there's really anyone at town that's gonna have much more to say about it than that. The cars will be
Well, is
coming
it-
and going, they will be residences.
Construction schedule is, and
If I could interrupt, just as a threshold, have you seen the plans?
no,
This is our first time.
yeah.
Okay, well, why don't you come on up? Just take a look at these.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So we bought the house not even knowing that this was an approved project.
Understand.
So it was after the fact. We're not dead set against it, but we're very concerned about how this is gonna.
Totally understandable.
Where is the entrance, where's the exit, is there two, is there more? I get that, there is a plan, but he just made a comment that there were other excavations done that weren't really approved.
I will allow some talk about some clearings, so a review of the plan, and that construction proceeds within the plan, will be done, is done, it'll get done the way it was planned to get done. and we have a building inspector, and there are plenty of eyes on them, and these guys know what they're doing. It will get done the way it's planned, and if it doesn't, that will be taken care of. All of these files are available in the building department for you to review to the extent that you want to. There's quite a bit of material. There's these plans. You know, we want to answer your questions, and these are good questions. You know, we obviously can't bring you up to speed on the entire project tonight. So traffic, there's going to be more cars. You know, I'm not sure there's much more of an explanation than that. Your drainage concerns are legitimate. I think everybody has drainage concerns in Scituate. You know, for the most part, the project is tasked with handling the drainage concerns that it raises. We're talking about peer review to confirm that as far as those situations are changing, we want to hear from them as to how those changes are being dealt with, and potentially hear from a peer reviewer as to how those changes are being dealt with.
And when that happens, those discussions will take place at a public meeting, and you'll be able to weigh in with your concerns. And if you have questions, you can certainly ask the engineer who's representing the board. These are our concerns, and then he or she will likely be able to address those concerns, or not.
If they are available at the public hearing, there's situations where they might not be. So that remains to be seen.
It's fair to note that this is a revision or change to an existing project, which is permitted. All of those reviews took place with the original application.
Totally understand.
So that, my recollection of the original application, there's no traffic light or change in
No, this
signage or anything. Your street will look, and I live on Meeting House Lane, so I'm not too far away. The street will look more or less the same as it does today. The project is in the back. There's a driveway that accesses it. There'll be more cars coming out of that driveway than do today. But with that exception, and the noise and inconvenience associated with construction, which happens when construction happens, but hopefully that gets over, and instead of being a vacant space that's developing, it will be completed, and it will be a residential neighborhood that will support our community. So we're not going back to square one here today. And I'm just, for the general public too, we wanted this to be, we recognize that this was a substantial change. We wanted a public hearing on it. We wanted people to come out, and talk about their concerns. But those things that are already in the special permit are in the special permit. And I think I'm sure it covered periods of construction.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
That was all in there, so none of that's changing. We've already tried to address that in multiple.
And that would be in the special permit, in the actual language of the special permit. Again, that's available in the building file. And typically, periods of construction are, it's right in there. They can't start work before 8 o'clock on 7 o'clock during weekdays, 8 o'clock on weekends or holidays. And typically in my experience, people tend to complain when they work on Saturdays or holidays, but the whole point is, the more work they do, the sooner they're done. So if you complain about the hours of work, it's just going to prolong the time that the work takes place.
Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman, to address the lady's comments, in the landscaping plans that were provided, sheet L-1, that's the entrance, if people are interested in looking to see where it's going to be by the street.
Yeah, this one right here.
All right. Ma'am, yes.
My name is Mary Jane Sylvester. I've been here since the planning board was asked to consider having 7 luxury homes on that property. So that was back in like 97. And they said no. We wouldn't be here today if there were luxury homes on that property.
Hindsight.
97.
97, yeah.
97.
22 years.
And they were in front of us the 40B started in 98.
Yeah.
I missed that meeting.
So, my concern is, where is the entrance to this new, because it was proposed to be at 96 Stockbridge Road, not 90, because 90 Stockbridge Road is directly across from
Sure.
Greenfield Lane, and that intersection between Common Street, Stockbridge, Greenfield Lane is now become a thoroughfare because so many people are, it definitely has increased in traffic. But my concern is very personal. I've had 6 cars come into my yard and 1 come into the house. So I mean, that is a traffic issue, which you can attest to.
I can attest.
So the applicant can show you where the entrance is, but my understanding is there's no change to the entrance from what was previously approved.
Yeah, 'cause we've already built the.
Yeah, there's,
So is it 96?
I have no idea what the number was. This is the Nielsen property, you know that?
Yeah.
With the pool behind it?
Yeah.
And then it's right beside it.
Okay, so I was told that 90 Stockbridge Road, which is directly across from yours, will be the road because it's wider, that the trucks can use, and there'll be a gate up there for fire trucks and things like that, so they can go around.
I don't
Is
know
that
what
going to change?
That was in the plan at
Yeah,
one
that
time.
was, that was in the plan at one time. To tell you the truth, I haven't,
Two entrances at one time.
yeah,
Not-
exactly.
Not formally.
is
but
there
No, but there was
90
like a breakaway gate
Right.
for fire in case the first access road was blocked. Because the first house is like 600 feet off of Stockbridge Road.
so,
It's gonna be a
just
thousand.
to, sorry, just to get it a little bit more back into a clear back and forth, because it's tough for Annie to keep track, but,
Sue,
sorry, Sue to keep track. I have been on the board long enough to mix up our names,
I
yeah.
think 90, so
Sorry.
96 will be the official.
Yeah, it's right across from my house.
Yep. Okay.
So, all right, so absolutely more information about locations and construction can be found in the file, but no changes to any of those situations are before us tonight. Yes,
Again, Michael Clark, 103 Stockbridge Road. I want to go back to the traffic real quick.
yes.
Project's been on the books for almost 2 decades. Stockbridge Road is much more heavily traveled now. I want to again encourage the board to look at the traffic. We've been delayed for 20 years. We all know that the town population, the permanent town population has gone up significantly over that time.
So you make a very valid point. The applicant's counsel will agree or disagree with me. My understanding is because they got the 74 units approved, and this is a reduction, even though that maybe that's a bite at the apple we should get again, I'm not sure it works that way.
Substantial change is the key word. You didn't have to,
So,
okay, you
as
didn't have to.
just one second, we're not gonna go back and forth, right? So
Okay.
I'll come back to you, but the traffic is approved, and they are not changing the amount of traffic, they're reducing it. I'm not sure we get another bite at the apple on that point. You raise a very valid point about the change in the years and the change in the surrounding neighborhood. I unfortunately don't believe we get another bite at that apple.
Well, I will disagree with you, because it's a substantial change, it's a different project. Okay, it's not the same project anymore. Okay, if you remember correctly, when the project was first approved, there was a large garden-style apartment complex out there, and it was significantly different. So it's gone through several iterations, and I believe it deserves a look at traffic, and I will provide that in writing once I get a look at it. Can I finish, please? 2 other comments. Are the plans available and documents available in electronic form? So do you have a
I believe
PDF?
that we have them in electronic form, yes.
And the third thing, and I know this is just for consideration, when the project was originally approved, there was a piece of sidewalk in front of that piece of property. That was eliminated because the town put sidewalk up. I would encourage the board to reconsider maybe extending the sidewalk up Stockbridge Road a ways to further that along within the same spirit of the initial permit approval.
Thank you.
to Mr. Clark's point, when this first came in, there was no train. And the train has come in, the Greenbush Station has opened since this was first applied for it back in 1998. I understand your point.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I'm just throwing it out there.
Sure.
I don't know that we can't consider that as just factually, traffic may have increased on Stockbridge Road. Now, as I remember the traffic study, and I kept it for I don't know how long, and finally I threw it out. But it's in the, obviously the town has it, but the trips on Stockbridge Road and the sight lines and everything, it was nowhere near like approaching a hazardous amount. Yeah, it was nowhere near it. But that's from a traffic engineering standpoint. Anecdotally, you talk to anybody from Scituate, they'll tell you Stockbridge Road is like a highway. And anybody that lives in Stockbridge Road will tell you people scream down that road. Now, traffic engineers might go out, they might do trip counts, but, you know, they're not going to have that kind of towny perspective that Ed has, that I have, that, you know, I don't know.
But to
That Tom and I are working on.
Yeah. Well, Tom's a
But
townie.
to that point,
So that I'm working on.
these structures, these dwellings are not going to change the speed on Stockbridge Road. The issues on Stockbridge Road are not about, I don't personally, anecdotally, I don't believe that there's going to be a huge change based on these houses. And I reiterate, they could go ahead and pull a permit tomorrow to build the permit that's approved.
Yeah.
And I'd rather not see them do that.
We have the ability to consider anything, and we have the ability to rule whatever we want. It doesn't make it right,
Yeah,
and
no,
it doesn't make
you're-
it,
Defensible.
And exactly, my opinion is that ship has sailed to the extent that there's really no way to look at it that the changed project is going to result in even one more car trip than the old project.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to when this project was originally approved in 2003, there was 69 units. As a result of the DEP matter, it was reduced to 68. It was increased to 74 rental units in 2011. Now we're going back to the original amount. So the project is fairly consistent. It's kind of ironic that we're going back to what it was originally approved for. So.
Any other public comments?
Can we go back to 7 luxury houses?
Yeah. They'd have to be big houses.
Anyone else from the audience?
Just
yes,
one other
please.
thing, and this is just for informational, okay? So we have a business across the street from us.
I'm
And
sorry.
We have
Where-
Nielsen's property,
the old Nielsen property.
the old Allen Wheeler property.
And so what happens there is, at that location, happens probably almost every other weekend, especially in the summertime. I notice it when I'm home. Tractor trailer will come, it'll scream by Nielsen's property, and it'll back up, and instead of going around again on Stockbridge Road, so it'll back up a couple hundred feet. So I would request maybe in the order, in the conditions, you're gonna have, I would imagine you're gonna have some type of construction vehicle traffic plan. Okay.
Already done.
It's already
All right. I would ask that be amended to include that no vehicles are allowed to back up on Stockbridge Road and to enter into that property.
I totally understand the request. I think what the construction plan, the construction vehicle plan, what construction vehicles are and are not allowed to do has already been settled. And to me, nothing about these proposed changes affects the number of construction vehicles and when and how and why. And at least some of the case law agrees with me that when even a substantial change doesn't affect that area, going back and trying to rewrite those portions of the comprehensive permit is, according to some of the case law, not proper.
That part I understand, but I would request of the developer, that being a good neighbor, that may buy him some goodwill.
I doubt the developer wants construction vehicles or tractor trailers backing up on any public way.
I understand.
I doubt the construction vehicles want to back up on a public way. And if we
Especially
put
on
if we put it in, but if we put that in the regulation, I don't understand how it could be enforced without having a full-time police officer there watching for it, because you can anecdotally say, I saw this guy do it, but unless you have video of it or something, I mean,
And
we're talking,
I live right across the street, I'll have video of it.
well, if you find that there is a traffic hazard, the town has a responsibility, irrespective of the project, to handle traffic issues. I mean, Stockbridge Road is an area that I think traffic rules and regulations should probably look at and try to see what they can do to ease the speed and.
Sure.
Yeah, should be reported to the police
But
department.
it's not something that has to be, imposed upon the development. I don't think it would be a practical imposition. I think it would be, easily ignored. If I'm driving a tractor trailer and I don't want to be backing it up on that road if I can avoid it. I'm going to try to be aware of where the property is. My second trip, I'm not backing up,
Okay,
I understand,
could
and
we-
I have to tell you that the last comment by the developer this made us move not to trust them, that it's the responsibility of the police department. That's a dangerous location, okay? It's the responsibility of the person running that operation to make sure the vehicles entering that place operate safely.
I think he was responding to my comment about the traffic rules and regs and what's going on Stockbridge Road, which we've anecdotally referred to because of the train, et cetera, et cetera. I go down Stockbridge Road every single morning. I'm very familiar with it. I don't think the applicant was suggesting that it's not his responsibility to supervise construction on his site. And I think
And I think generally, we're coming up on 9 o'clock, you're making valid points, but whether or not we have the right to enforce them, the ability, I think you understand where we have some trouble with them. So we're all set with public comment. We're gonna close that, and then,
Anthony, can we vote to retain CEI or vote to request to retain CEI as our consulting engineer and ask for a retainer from the applicant?
I think that we can. I think that maybe we should talk about specifically what we're retaining them for as part
Absolutely.
of that motion. So I think we mentioned drainage. We mentioned, and to be honest, I think that in terms of suggesting CEI, I think it's fair. The town put forth a list. I think it's fair to hear from the applicant as to their thoughts on the list.
You mentioned being familiar with the project. Matt Lunsford was out on the project. He was representing the town at one time. That's why we agree with him, because he's been on the site. He did some perk tests with me, so he's familiar with the project.
Okay,
CEI.
great. So more to, I think we
can I comment on
sort of
that?
shut that down. No,
Just on the peer review.
Hey.
CEI hasn't worked in town in over a decade.
okay, I think we're all set with the public comment. I apologize, but I think we got to close that down and we just
Okay, I'll just
to
give
try
you
to keep
something
it.
helpful.
I understand. Thank you. So as to content, what are we tasking them with?
Reviewing the drainage calculations and the revisions to the site plan with the modified application. I mean, it's to me, it's pretty straightforward. It's the changes to the impervious surface and the drainage.
Stormwater management.
Yeah.
Okay. Changes to impervious surface, drainage, stormwater management.
Yeah, essentially what Dick
Presented tonight.
tonight.
That sounds, I want it out there. I
Yeah.
want these guys to comment on it.
I mean,
I
that's-
think that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I'm 100% in favor of it.
Okay. So,
We're okay with that scope.
and you're okay with that? All right. Time frame? Do we want to include that in a motion? Do we want to hear from
Well,
them first?
Well, first we've got to get the money. Once we have the money, then we can engage him.
Then we get the power?
Then, but we can't engage him until we have the money.
Yes, I agree. I meant, in the
And
process
then-
of engaging him.
And then we'd give him 30 days to review.
There we go. All right.
So the sooner you get the cash to whomever, I don't know who it is,
What is the
to
cash?
Sue? Sue, is it to you?
Yes, to the
That's-
town
You need
situation.
to get
Town
the
of
whole
Scituate.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have us propose and vote on a motion for seeking from a specific peer reviewer, which we just found, CEI, a specific term of review. And then I agree with the applicant, you certainly have more experience in this process, that we need to get a proposal from them.
Yeah, it would be a proposal to review the.
What we
you
just
know,
talked about.
Yeah.
But they're gonna throw out a number. These guys are going to hopefully agree with that number, or if they feel necessary, negotiate that number, and then we'll get the money. I don't think they're just gonna give us money.
We've told them how, in the past, we've told the applicant, we need 10,000 for the lawyer, we need 10,000 for
How much
the-
money do we want?
For the, we need 10,000 for the engineer.
Right.
Just, but that's a different scope of review.
Right.
For this, I would say, I think 5,000 would be more than enough. And it would probably, from what I understand, it would probably come in closer to 2,500, but 5,000 to be on the safe side.
I tend to agree with it.
Great,
It's not the first, by the way.
sure. As you could see, I'm trying to flesh out a full motion.
So if we were
Yeah.
to seek a $5,000 retainer
Yes.
to be expended in association with a proposal by CEI or another mutually agreed upon consulting engineer for the review as outlined in the scope Brian just mentioned.
Changes in impervious area, drainage, stormwater.
Yep.
And to be concluded within 30 days, and all expediency
Requested.
requested. Does that work?
Great. So you guys will be able to get that money to Annie, is the way we do that?
To Sue.
I've done that twice.
And
Thanks.
We don't even look,
Huh?
we don't even look up.
No, no.
You already used up
She answers
Annie.
the phone still. It's-
What are you gonna do?
Okay, yes.
Great.
To the town of Scituate.
Motion?
Move.
Move to retain an engineer and a retainer cost of $5,000.
Second?
Scope of work to be completed in 30 days.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
30 days.
Great.
Move to continue this till,
Can we say your next hearing date, Mr. Chairman? And
Yes, so it,
it'll have to get continued, maybe.
Shovel in the ground, so.
our next hearing date is set,
Oh, wait, do we change that?
we did,
February
right?
28th.
February 28th, a
Yeah.
Thursday at the library.
That's it.
We have a second.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Here we go.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes,